Daniel and Claire Winters were the perfect couple until the day Claire vanished, and Daniel confessed to a crime so gruesome it left an entire town in shock. In the quiet town of Maple Ridge, where everyone knew each other by name and families gathered on porches during warm evenings, Daniel and Claire Winters were the couple everyone admired. Their two-story colonial house with white shutters and a manicured lawn sat neatly at the end of a cul-de-sac, the kind of place that seemed untouched by trouble. Daniel was a successful real estate agent with a clean-cut appearance and a polished charm that made him a favorite among local clients. Claire taught part-time art classes at the community center and ran a small online business selling handmade pottery. She had a calm, kind nature, the sort that made neighbors instantly like her. Together they looked like the picture of happiness, smiling at barbecues, hosting wine nights, and exchanging polite laughter with friends at weekend markets. But beneath the surface of their picture-perfect life, something darker was unfolding. Behind closed doors, the smiles began to fade. Those close to Claire noticed subtle changes in her over the past year. She had become more withdrawn, her usual vibrant energy dimmed. She stopped attending social gatherings, canceled art classes unexpectedly, and often claimed she wasn't feeling well. Her closest friend, a woman named Beth, noticed bruises on Claire's wrist once, but Claire brushed it off with a vague excuse about a kitchen accident. What most people didn't know was that Daniel had become increasingly controlling. He monitored Claire's spending, questioned her about phone calls, and often grew angry over seemingly small things. To outsiders, he remained the charming, level-headed husband. But to Claire, he had become unpredictable, someone she could no longer trust. He began keeping a notebook hidden beneath a floorboard in her studio, documenting their arguments, his outbursts, and her growing fear. She wrote about the way he watched her, the way his voice changed when he was angry, and how she no longer felt safe in her own home. By late September, Claire had made a decision. She opened a new bank account in secret and began transferring small amounts of money into it. She reconnected with her sister, whom she hadn't spoken to in nearly a year, and started making plans to leave Maple Ridge for good. Her intention was to disappear quietly, no confrontation, no drama, just a clean break. She even began looking at apartments in Vermont and made inquiries about teaching jobs in local schools. She never told Daniel. She prepared to leave. She took extra care to act normal. She kept cooking dinner, tending to the garden, and updating her art blog. She wanted everything to appear calm until she was ready to go. But what Claire didn't know was that Daniel had noticed the shift in her behavior. He had begun checking her phone when she was in the shower, tracking her internet history, and sensing that something was slipping out of his control. He wasn't going to let her leave, not without consequences, just days before she was set to go. Claire Winters vanished, leaving behind only unanswered calls, a few scattered belongings, and a silence that would unravel one of the most disturbing murder cases the town had ever seen. Claire's disappearance began quietly, almost too quietly for a woman with such a consistent daily routine. On the morning of October 12th, Claire was expected to meet her friend Beth for coffee at a local cafe they frequented every Thursday. When Claire didn't show up, Beth assumed something had come up. But when her texts went unanswered, and her calls went straight to voicemail, a sense of unease crept in. By the following morning, concern turned into alarm. Beth drove to the Winters' home, but no one answered the door. Claire's car was in the driveway, and the curtains were drawn tightly shut. Beth contacted the police that afternoon. She told them this wasn't like Claire. She never went anywhere without letting someone know. The responding officers visited the home, where Daniel answered the door. He looked tired, but not particularly distressed. He explained that Claire had left 2 days earlier to visit her sister in Vermont, and had turned off her phone to take a break from everything. He said they had been arguing and she needed space. The officers took down the information and left without entering the home, noting nothing suspicious, at least not yet. When detectives contacted Claire's sister, they got a very different story. Not only had Claire not arrived, but she hadn't spoken to her sister in nearly a month. That was enough to reopen the case as a potential missing person investigation. Authorities returned to the Winters residence, this time with more questions. Daniel remained cooperative but vague, repeated that Claire had been under a lot of stress, that she was emotional and impulsive, and that he wasn't surprised she had gone without telling anyone else. He said she had done something similar once before, early in their marriage. But the detectives weren't convinced. The details didn't add up. They obtained surveillance footage from a nearby intersection showing Claire's car leaving the neighborhood late on the night of October 10th, but no one could confirm who was driving. Later footage showed Daniel driving the same car alone, early the next morning, headed in the opposite direction. A neighbor reported hearing loud noises coming from the Winters' garage around midnight on the 10th. She thought it was strange, like banging metal, but assumed they were working on a home improvement project. That same day, a review of security footage from a local hardware store showed Daniel purchasing items that raised immediate red flags. I saw several rolls of heavy-duty plastic sheeting, duct tape, rubber gloves, and a gallon of industrial-strength bleach. Investigators returned to the house with a search warrant. Inside, the home was clean, eerily so. The kitchen smelled of lemon, the bathroom sparkled, and the carpets had clearly been shampooed recently. But the garage was different. Though nothing was visibly out of place, the air carried an overpowering chemical smell. Forensic teams sprayed luminol, chemical used to detect blood traces even if they'd been cleaned. The garage lit up in patches. There had been blood. A lot of it. 3 days later, a jogger running through a wooded area just 15 miles from Maple Ridge stumbled upon a plastic bag near a stream. Inside was a human arm, wrapped in painter's plastic and bound with duct tape. The hand had chipped blue nail polish. Claire's sister confirmed that was the color Claire had been wearing the last time they spoke. The investigation was no longer about a missing person. It had become something far more horrific. As the investigation escalated, detectives focused all attention on Daniel Winters. The calm exterior he maintained began to crack under the growing pressure. Authorities searched the entire Winters property again, this time with cadaver dogs and forensic teams working around the clock. In the basement, behind a locked utility room that Daniel had failed to mention during earlier interviews, officers found something chilling: a second deep freezer hidden behind stacked boxes and old furniture. The door was duct taped shut, and the plug had been removed from the wall. When they forced the freezer open, the smell was overwhelming, even with the contents frozen solid. Inside were multiple garbage bags tightly knotted and labeled with masking tape. Forensic experts carefully removed each one, and as they thawed and examined the contents, it became horrifyingly clear what they had found. Human remains, Claire's torso, her legs, pieces of tissue and muscle, all methodically wrapped in layers of plastic and painter's drop cloths. Her head and one arm were still missing. News of the discovery spread quickly through the quiet town. Maple Ridge, once known for its safe streets and friendly neighbors, was now the center of a grisly murder investigation. The community was stunned. Many who had known Daniel and Claire couldn't believe what they were hearing. It seemed impossible that the clean-cut man who sold houses with a smile and hosted summer cookouts could be capable of something so monstrous. With physical evidence now linking Daniel directly to the crime, investigators dug deeper. Search of the couple's shared laptop revealed disturbing internet activity. Weeks before Claire's disappearance, Daniel had searched for phrases like "how to cut through bone," "how to dissolve human tissue," and "can police detect bleach-cleaned blood?" It also browsed articles on missing persons, disposal methods, and cold case homicides. The search history spanned several months, suggesting a long period of planning, contradicting his later claims of a spontaneous act of violence.
Even more incriminating were the financial records investigators uncovered. Claire had quietly moved over $18,000 into a separate bank account under her name. Emails showed she had been in contact with a divorce attorney. These revelations provided a clear motive. Daniel had seen the signs and realized Claire was preparing to leave him, not just emotionally, but financially. In his mind, he was about to lose everything: his wife, his money, and his image. Cell phone data placed Daniel near the wooded area where Claire's severed arm was discovered. GPS records also showed he had made multiple late-night trips out of town in the days following Claire's disappearance, often to isolated areas with no apparent reason. One of those routes led to an abandoned quarry, another to a remote lake hours away. Authorities launched extensive searches in these locations, hoping to recover Claire's missing body parts, but nothing more was found. By now, it was clear that Daniel had gone to disturbing lengths to cover up his crime. The dismemberment, the freezer, the bleach, the remote disposal sites, it all painted the picture of a calculated, methodical killer. The man once thought to be a loving husband was revealed to be hiding a dark and violent truth. The turning point in the investigation came when Daniel Winters finally broke. After days of intense questioning, mounting evidence, and relentless media coverage, he confessed to the murder of his wife. The confession wasn't given in a dramatic outburst, but in a low, almost emotionless voice during an overnight interrogation. Investigators had cornered him with too many fact surveillance footage, blood evidence, GPS data, and the horrifying discovery in the basement freezer. He knew there was no way out. Daniel claimed the murder was not premeditated. He said it happened during an argument, one that spiraled out of control. According to his statement, Claire had confronted him about his controlling behavior and told him she was leaving. She mentioned the money she had moved and that she had already contacted a lawyer. Daniel described a wave of rage coming over him, and in that moment, he struck her. He said he used a wrench from the garage workbench, hitting her once on the side of the head. Claire fell, hitting the concrete floor. He insisted that he didn't mean to kill her, that it was a moment of blind fury. But his actions in the aftermath told a very different story. Rather than call for help or turn himself in, Daniel spent the next several days hiding Claire's body, cleaning the crime scene, and methodically dismembering her. He used tools he had purchased weeks earlier, tools investigators later found in the garage, still stained with blood. He described laying her body on a tarp, using plastic sheets to contain the mess. And working at night when neighbors were asleep, he placed parts of her body in garbage bags, storing them in the basement freezer, and disposed of others in remote wooded areas during early morning drives. Daniel said he panicked and didn't know what to do. But his confession didn't match the evidence that suggested long-term planning. His internet searches, dating back months, involved researching body disposal and forensic cleaning methods. It became clear that, at the very least, he had fantasized or considered the act long before that night. In his statement, he admitted to lying to police about Claire's whereabouts and creating the story about her trip to Vermont. He said he hoped that if enough time passed, people would believe she had left on her own. He deleted her messages, took over her social media accounts, and even sent an email to her sister pretending to be Claire, saying she needed space and wanted to cut contact for a while. The confession shocked the community and devastated Claire's family. The image of Daniel as a charming, put-together professional was destroyed. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues were left in disbelief. Many couldn't reconcile the calm, well-mannered man. They thought they knew what the horrifying actions he had described. But investigators believed there was still more to the story. Parts of Claire's body were still missing. The level of planning suggested a deeper intent. And most chillingly, Daniel showed almost no remorse. His tone during the confession remained detached, as if recounting events from someone else's life. The man who once shared a home, a bed, and a future with Claire had turned into someone unrecognizable, a cold figure at the center of an unthinkable crime. Daniel Winters was charged with first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and obstruction of justice. His trial began 5 months after his arrest, drawing nationwide attention. The courtroom was filled with reporters, curious locals, and Claire's grieving family. The prosecution built a case around Daniel's deliberate, calculated efforts to kill and conceal the murder of his wife. They presented the evidence meticulously. The search history, the bleach-stained garage, the hidden freezer, and the haunting confession recorded on video. Photos of Claire's dismembered body were shown behind closed doors to the jury, too graphic to be released publicly. The timeline was clear, the motive well established, and the planning undeniable. Daniel's defense painted a very different picture. They portrayed him as a man under emotional distress, driven to a breaking point by fear and desperation. His lawyers argued that the murder was not premeditated but a tragic reaction to the unraveling of his marriage. They claimed Claire had become emotionally distant, manipulative, and cold, painting her as unstable, a tactic that drew public outrage. They requested the charge be reduced to manslaughter, pleading for leniency and citing Daniel's clean record and mental state at the time of the crime. The jury wasn't convinced. After only 2 days of deliberation, they returned with a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. Daniel showed no reaction as the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom gallery, Claire's mother wept quietly, clutching a small photo of her daughter taken on her wedding day. Justice had been served, but no punishment could undo the horrors of what had been done. Following the trial, Maple Ridge tried to return to normal, but the shadow of the crime lingered. The Winters house stood empty, eventually sold at a loss to a distant buyer unaware of its history. Claire's art studio was dismantled, her belongings boxed and donated, and her memory honored through a scholarship set up at the local art school. But one last twist surfaced nearly 6 months later, one that reopened old wounds and shed new light on the depths of the tragedy. During renovations to the backyard by the home's new owners, a buried metal box was discovered beneath a layer of bricks near the garden. Inside were photographs, letters, and a leather-bound journal wrapped in a Ziploc bag. The journal belonged to Claire. It contained detailed accounts of her life with Daniel, going back several years. She wrote about his growing temper, his controlling habits, and the fear that had slowly replaced love. She described gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and veiled threats. Most chillingly, in the final entries, Claire wrote that she believed Daniel was capable of hurting her if she ever tried to leave. The journal's existence confirmed what investigators had suspected but couldn't fully prove. Claire had been living in fear. Her death wasn't the result of a sudden argument, it was the endpoint of long-term abuse. The discovery of her words, after death, gave her back a voice. It also served as a tragic reminder that the worst dangers are sometimes found not in the dark corners of society, but in the places we trust the most, behind locked doors, within quiet homes, beside people who smile and say everything's fine.